I simulated Franchise Hockey Manager 11 50 years into the future, and we're going to go through the results as to which teams were the most successful and if any players managed to actually do pretty well as well. We did a video before 25 years into the future, so this is just 25 years past that. So if you end up seeing it before, we'll kind of do more of a breakdown on everything, not just the last 25 years. So we'll end up doing it for the full 25. As you can see, this year, Pittsburgh ended up winning. That was, believe it or not, that was the first time that they ended up winning in 50 years. So we'll look at the history first, look at all the championships, and see who ended up doing well. Obviously, we can't really go too much in detail onto it because it's going to take forever to get through it. But Washington ended up being dominant for the tail end of this simulation. I thought that it's going to be crazy. They managed to win what five years out of 6, which is kind of crazy. Nashville ended up winning there, and even the last two, as I was paying attention to it, they did pretty well. They got knocked out pretty late in the playoffs as well. So out of dynasties, they're the only ones. Washington ends up actually getting the most championships out of anyone. But as you can see, they end up going through a nice run there. But I'll go back from the start. So obviously we had the Panthers, Dallas Oilers, and then Dallas again. So Dallas going on a little bit of a run there, and then Utah kind of doing it as well. You end up having Connor Bedard getting his first championship there in 2032-2033. Blues end up winning. Red Wings actually kind of were pretty good as well. We'll get into that. We'll go into each team afterwards. I'm going to mainly focus on the NHL because nothing really interesting when in any of the other leagues. No team looked too dominant, so we'll kind of go through this. We might look at a couple drafts as well. But Flyers did well as well. They ended up winning 2 years out of 3. I'll go into how many championships each team won after that. But Flyers did pretty decent. Kings did win as well, and Blues did as well. The first 25 years, Blues and Flyers end up doing pretty well. I think they had the top wins out of anyone. And they end up having Red Wings again, so they kind of consistently won every 10 years or so. But they won a couple championships. Oilers end up winning again. Calgary, Carolina, and then Blue Jackets end up winning as well as Flyers and Blues once again. I think that was the tail end of the last episode with the Minnesota Wild winning back-to-back. And then you had the Golden Knights win back-to-back again. And then Red Wings, Flames, Dallas, and then Blue Jackets again with back-to-back there. Kings and then Sabres finally win their first franchise win 2058-59. So sorry, Buffalo Sabres fans. It's going to be quite a while before you guys end up winning a championship. At that point, Columbus Blue Jackets already end up winning their third before you guys could win your first. So who would have thought of that? Red Wings, like I said, win again. Kings as well. Pretty consistent there. Vancouver Canucks ends up winning their first, I believe. Let me check. I think they end up winning just the one, yeah. Did they? No, I think they won one. No, they just won the one as far as I'm... no, they won 2, sorry. This is their second one that they end up winning. Anaheim ends up winning. Wild, Capitals, pretty much every team ends up winning it. There are 23 different teams that ended up winning. And the teams that didn't, I will go into it after, but we'll go into the... in terms of the standings and everything and kind of show it a little bit. But the 2 last ones were Calgary Flames and Penguins. We'll go through the chart here. As you can see, we end up having Capitals end up winning the most. They end up winning 5 championships. I don't think it'll show it here. Yeah, it's too bad that it doesn't show it like right next to it, like right in the corner here. I won't let me show it, but like right around that area, it'd be nice if it can kind of show that as well. Capitals end up winning 5. Flyers end up winning 4. Red Wings with 4 as well. Wild end up getting 3. Flames with 3. Blues 3. Jackets 3. Utah with 3 as well. And then with all the 2s were the Knights, Oilers, Canucks. And then the teams to only win 1 were Sabres, Nashville, Hurricanes, Devils, Blackhawks, Tampa, Florida. Both those 2 were at the beginning. Ducks, Seattle, Penguins. The teams to not win. are the Jets, who have never won any franchise, like any Stanley Cups for their franchise. Colorado, who hadn't won since 2022. These ones are going to be kind of shocking, and Sharks never won as well. So Sharks here, they did pretty well, but they didn't. They couldn't quite get it done. And then most of the teams are in the West. So out of all the champions, 28 times it was in the West, and 23 times, or 22 times, sorry, it was in the East. But in the East, that means that there's a lot of teams that didn't end up winning. Ottawa Senators being one of them. They have never won any franchise. They've been pretty good, consistently making the playoffs. As you can see, the last couple of years they did pretty good. But we'll go into each team individually after that. And then Canadiens and Toronto still have not won. So Toronto has gone over 100 years without winning a Stanley Cup, which is kind of wild. Keep in mind, Ottawa's never won. And then you end up having the Bruins, who didn't win either. So most of the teams in the same division, all the Atlantic didn't win. But it's been a while even for Montreal. They haven't won since like '93, I think. And then Boston Bruins, with being more recent out of all of them, winning there as well. And then in the Metropolitan, the teams to not win were the Rangers and the Islanders. Who would think that the two teams that don't end up winning are the two teams in New York? Kind of crazy. I don't think Islanders hadn't won since the '80s, and then I think the '90s for Rangers. But we'll go deep dive into each team, see if there's anyone that kind of jumps out there. But like I said, there's not really too much, I would say, in terms of anything that really surprised me throughout this. But we'll go to, I guess we'll start with the Montreal Canadiens, I guess. So we'll start with the Canadiens, and then we'll end with the Canadiens. Like I said, they didn't end up winning anything. Cole Caulfield ends up getting one of the top points getters, but other than that, nothing really jumping out. Carey Price still at the top, Jacques Plante as well with Patrick Roy. So as you can see, they made the playoffs intermittently, but they won a decent run around the late 20s, but couldn't quite get the job done, and unfortunately didn't win anything. Nashville ended up winning in 67-68, so they almost went the full 50 without winning. But they were a pretty consistent playoff team, so kind of like what they were there. They ended up missing it for a huge stretch there, even losing a ton of fans with only around 8,000, 9,000. But they kind of went decent in terms of the playoffs as well. And then also missing for stretches there as well, losing tons of fans in the process, because obviously their fans are loyal, but obviously loyal to an extent. If you can't deliver and you can't make the playoffs, then obviously you're going to lose a ton of fans. But Pekka Rinne still top in terms of wins leader. Saros ends up getting in second, and then Carter Essler, obviously one of the regens here. Top three, not too bad. Casper Pind is one of the players that ended up making it 20-32-33. He ends up getting the franchise leader. Forsberg second in terms of goals and top three in terms of points. So not bad at all. Nothing really kind of jumping out there. New Jersey Devils ended up winning. I think they won two or one. I think they won one, and that was early on. So it's probably Jack Hughes' era, if I'm not mistaken. 39-40. So Jack Hughes, I think he maybe won on the end. Yeah, he won at when he was getting pretty old there. But he's now the franchise leader with a decent amount more points than anyone else, and even goals as well. He has 200 more than Nico Hischier, who played around the same era. Patrick Elias still at the top with that as well. Brodeur still, no one can touch those wins, but players have come close. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of touches that. I think Bob Boyd, Bob Boyd's the closest one in their franchise to be able to come close. But other than that, not many surprises. They did make the playoffs pretty consistently throughout the whole thing. Not like what I just said with Nashville, where they didn't, but it's kind of sad that they managed to be a consistent playoff team and only really winning the one time. But consistency is still pretty good. Then here we have Islanders, who have not won, and it doesn't look like anything change. None of their points leader has changed. Sorokin ended up making it in terms of the top 3. I think Carson Anderson, he ends up getting the franchise leader actually, but can't quite deliver. Doesn't look like he did that great other than his last season. So his last season was probably their best chance. But playoff-wise, not really consistent. They're a consistent team that didn't make it. They did do pretty well with the team that they have now, obviously, in real life, because up to the 30s they're pretty decent, but obviously not making it more often than not for the rest of it. Unfortunately, not getting the job done there. Rangers, another example of a team kind of on the opposite, actually. They didn't look like they were that consistent at all, which, I mean, if I'm being honest, does not seem realistic. They had a few stretches there where they actually had some playoff appearances. Looks like 10 years around that they had it, but for more often than not, them not making the playoffs. But Ryabov, who, I mean, you can get in probably like the second or third season, I believe. He ends up getting a top 3 in terms of franchise points. That's pretty crazy. Top 3 in terms of goals as well, and second only to Brian Leach in terms of assists. So that's pretty good. Mark Jester, also a pretty consistent goalie, it looks like. 416 wins. He is around 37, so probably not going to break that. I mean, consistent. I wouldn't say good, but consistent. He ended up playing with them for a while. I'm surprised they didn't get rid of him just based on that level of mediocrity, I would say. He does end up finishing second in terms of shutout leaders, so maybe it's not necessarily him, maybe it's just the team. But we'll go down to Ottawa Senators, who still have not won. I think Vigo Bjork was a regen. He did well, finishing second only to Alfredson. Crazy though, and Brady Tkachuk getting top goals, but couldn't quite get the job done yet. They did pretty well towards the end. Again, big stretches of not making the playoffs, and then like dominance in terms of doing pretty well in terms of the league by making the playoffs pretty consistently. But as you can see, even here, they haven't made it since 2017, and then up to 2027. So little ways. One might say that they weren't probably managed properly. But Andre Tverdy, he looks like he's relatively new, I guess. He's 14 when the game starts, so he's still in the system at least. Kyle Pratt, second in terms of all-time wins, and then Chris Furtado with the top 3, but ultimately not being able to get it done. Tverdy with first in terms of shutout leaders. Patrick Lalime actually still finishes top 3. That is crazy. 30 shutouts is not that much. Does not look like they had a consistent goalie throughout it to really do anything. And then here's where it starts to kind of get interesting. Billy Zonin ends up making it in terms of the top points for Philadelphia Flyers. Bobby Clark with second, and then Michkov couldn't quite pass Clark within a couple points, which is crazy. Billy Zonin, right now in the world of hockey, is 18. He is eligible for the draft this season, so he's probably one of the first ones that you should probably draft of this series for sure. And obviously Michkov doing pretty well too. They couldn't quite get it done for a while. I think Michkov had a couple there. Yeah, Billy Zonin and Michkov get 2 there, but I doubt that they were there for 2047, 48. That'd be crazy. But looks like they did pretty well throughout that time, and also still kind of making the playoffs every season or so. But doing pretty well overall, I would say. Not too bad for Philadelphia Flyers. I think anyone could say that they would probably trade off having 6 championships than not necessarily winning every single year, even making the playoffs. Pittsburgh Penguins pretty much stays the same. I think Gus Land might be the only one that ends up jumping out here. But Marc-Andre Fleury, his dominance when he was in the league is crazy. He ended up winning a ton. He did everything for the Pittsburgh Penguins for sure. They only won the last year. Otherwise, they wouldn't have won at all in 50 years. So everything all hails to Crosby, Lemieux, and Malkin. They have all top three here. I think the only team close to this is probably Edmonton, where they have obviously the players that you would know. But Marc-Andre Fleur is still the shutout leader, which, I mean, 44 is not crazy, but it's still pretty good. Ultimately, only getting the job done once. And then here we have San Jose. Patrick Marleau still points leader, and then Celebrini ends up finishing second, but obviously no championships in his future. Antonio Carrera, I think, was also a pick there as well, but kind of crazy though that couldn't quite get the job done. Nabokov still top wins leader and shutout leader, but doesn't look like they did too well. I saw them in the playoffs a little bit. Yeah, here it looks like I think that's in the past here. It doesn't look like Celebrini really does anything. So if you're banking on Celebrini and the San Jose Sharks of doing anything, it doesn't look like that's in the realm of possibilities. It looks like Valley could be the only one that's there as well. Nabokov, Matamblot, I think, is also a regen. And then Stuart Skinner actually went to their team as well. He finishes top three, which is kind of crazy as well. But yeah, Celebrini, the only one really jumping in, and Carrera and I guess Hackler for right now. But still can't quite get it done. Maybe in a couple seasons they would be able to. Seattle now only won the one championship in their franchise history, and it was relatively early. They ended up winning in 29-30 and ultimately not doing anything. All these players are obviously regens. It doesn't look like any of these players were in the league when they end up starting. Kyle Lauch with the Leafs, probably the more recent one out of all of them. William Gallant, maybe William Gallant though. But ultimately, this is their franchise. I won't spend too much time on it because most of these players won't be on the team. They actually had Krokachov, but as you can see, even in 50 years, they still haven't really had consistency here in terms of players and even playoffs. They managed to make it most seasons, but never really able to win it though. Still early franchise, but not many fans, I will say. I think they're probably the least, one of the least followed teams out of any team. And then St. Louis here with doubling up their championships here, or sorry, quadrupling. They end up winning 4. We couldn't quite get it done when we ended up managing them, so it's nice to see that they managed to do it in 2034. They managed to get it, obviously, the last time in 2019. But then they end up winning 2 other times other than that, more recently coming in 46-47. Federico at the top. Thomas ends up actually making top 3, which is pretty good. I think he made it for us as well. And then Peter Nemec, our regen, ends up making it as well with 972 points. Wins leader, Ole Anderson, who's still playing 374, is the top. I think we end up beating it with anyone else as well. So anytime that you kind of manage a team for 10 years or more, it's definitely a good chance that you could end up passing the wins leader in this St. Louis team, because it's not that much 10 years, obviously, with a goalie that's starting consistently. But only getting the job a couple times, and here we have Tampa Bay Lightning. They only did it the one time, and that was pretty early on. They ended up winning in 24-25 and then didn't make the playoffs for a long stretch, which doesn't seem likely in real life, obviously. Jeffrey Bernard ends up making top 3 in terms of points, but no surprises here. Vasilevsky with 480 in the wins leader list. So nothing really to say there. Toronto have not made a splash at all. Austin Matthews, Marner, and then the new gen Steven Trawick ends up making it. Riley in top 3 in terms of points. So nothing shocking. I mean, goalies. Turk Broda was I think in 36, 37. He is their franchise leader in terms of wins. They got Jake Oninger. I think I got him in the past as well, and it seems like a cancer. I never end up winning with him. But the fact that they can't replicate anything from over 100 years ago is insane. But the fact that Jake Oninger couldn't even pass wins leader, kind of suspect in my opinion. But not the kind of a semi-consistent playoff team. but ultimately not being able to get the job done is, I think they only crossed maybe 50 wins twice. Oh no, sorry, they end up getting it 4 times probably in 50 years. That is That's pretty sad. I would love to spend more time on Toronto, but the fact that they haven't won means that I might have to do a save with them just to be able to do that. Utah Hockey Club end up winning 3 on the other hand, with Vasilevsky actually. Is that the same Vasilevsky? Vasilevsky ended up winning a ton of games for 2 different franchises. He ended up joining when he was 35 here in 2030, and he has 5 championships. So easily the best goalie of all time. I will have to say is Vasilevsky. We'll go into NHL after to see if he managed to come close in terms of wins. But Tijaginla and Chernikov, who is currently is that Igor? Yeah, Igor Chernikov, who is currently with San Jose Sharks. So they end up acquiring him somehow. I'm not sure, but he ends up doing pretty well. You can get him in the save. To starting this. Logan Cooley also top 3 in terms of assists. I didn't quite see that before, but Tajaginla also a player that got drafted this year as well. So he ends up doing pretty well, and then Vic Storm ends up getting the top. But Tajaginla and Chernikonov, obviously the best moves that they end up doing in their franchise history because they did pretty well early on. I think 31-32 would definitely be them two that gets the championship win there, and then Vasilevsky, crazy, only 257 wins though, so they didn't really stick with anyone long enough after that, and then they only won the one championship in 2060-63 or 62-63, so kind of crazy, but they still have more championships than the Leafs in that time. Vancouver with the 2. Pettersson ends up being the top, then Danny Snooty ends up getting a second as well. Tony McKnighter, obviously a regen as well. Probably when the 426 is pretty good in terms of wins. Luongo second, he only had 252. How long was he with them though? Felt like forever. Not even 10 years. That's crazy. I don't know why I always thought that he was there for longer. But yeah, pretty good though. Overall, they end up winning the twice. They end up winning in 2063-62, and then obviously the 36-37. So Pettersson looks like he got one of those. If I had to guess, he would have, but nothing really jumping out other than that. Golden Knights end up having 3. They obviously won the 1 in real life, so they only won 2 in 50 years. Oscar Wenberg. Yeah, I think we end up getting him at some point. And then Martin McCulloch, and then Shea Theodore actually top 3. So the fact that a defenseman is top 3 doesn't really bode well for your franchise. Sean Nash in terms of wins, top Timo Morgan, and then Bobby Jenks. So obviously all those being regens. And then save percentage, Marc-Andre Fleury actually top 3 with 917 is pretty cool. And he's still top 3 in terms of shutout leaders for 2 organizations. That's pretty crazy. And also kind of sad for Vegas. So obviously not keeping goalies for that long. Porter Martoni actually top 3 in terms of goals as well. Where did he went to Ottawa and then Vegas for a while, and then Canadiens to end the franchise, or end his time. So Vegas winning just the 2 times in 50 years, and then Washington going on dominance more recently. I think Max Milicevic. Obviously, you can get him in a couple of years here. He looks like he's pretty good. But obviously Ovechkin gets the top, and then I think Jerry Carlisle might be the other one that, regen at some point. Daniel Harrison, I think, is a regen as well. He does pretty well, clearly, for this franchise, but probably towards the tail end. Let's see if he didn't win any of the championships with them. That is crazy. That is crazy. So they end up winning with someone who's not even close to their franchise. Grubauer, let's see, Troy. Must be him, yeah. Troy Nikiforuk. 1 with the Wild 2 times, and then 1 with Washington 2 times. He must have won. That is crazy. Yeah, he won 4 championships, so pretty close to Vasilevsky. But the fact that they ended up winning with 2 different goalies is pretty astonishing too. So Washington Capitals with 6 all time is pretty good. Now we go to Winnipeg, who do not look like they're very good. Scheifele ends up getting the top, and then Eriksson and Dupont. So obviously Dupont being one of the earlier players that you can get. But top 3 is pretty good. Again, a defenseman getting the top is not necessarily something you'd expect. But ultimately, not winning anything is pretty sad. Anaheim Ducks end up winning more recently in 64-65, but I think they won. Yeah, they'd won in real life, so they only won the one. Harrison Bonninger, I think it can be drafted in one of the first years, but he ends up getting second all time in terms of wins. Steve Griffin is currently a regen as well, or just a regen that end up getting the top, so not bad. Kevin Halsell end up getting the top. I don't think, yeah, he was a regen for sure, and then Zegras ends up coming in second. So Solani's still top 3 though, but obviously Kevin ends up breaking that, but that takes like 40 years for them to do that. So obviously no player as dominant as Timmy Solani, but he gets knocked down from top 3, obviously from Zegras and from Halsall, but ultimately doing pretty good. And then yeah, Griffin at the top in terms of shutout leaders there as well. Boston did not win, so they have the 6 championships, but did not win at all in the 50 years, and doesn't look like anything really changed there. Pasternak being the only one here. I don't think this guy was real life, but I don't think anyone else really came close. Pasternak with the only one that's really jumps out there. Brad Marchand finishes with the top list and top goals, but can't make the top 3. Crazy. Ray Bork's still at the top. Tuukka Rask, and then Tiny Thompson, I think, was when they were younger. I think this guy was Evgeny Osterov getting top 3 there, but nothing really jumping out. Linus Ullmark with the most save percentage is kind of crazy. Buffalo end up winning the one time in the 58-59, but ultimately not really doing anything. Doesn't look like anything really jumps out at it. Dominic Hasek and Swayman they end up getting, finishing at the top with Ryan Miller. So again, team without 300 wins as a goalie in 50 years probably didn't do too great, I would imagine. So Darling couldn't quite get the top in terms of points, but he does get it in terms of assists. And then Greg Birmingham end up getting a top 3 as well. Jerome McGinley at the top. Gavin McKenna, you can draft him pretty early on. I think he's eligible in the next year or 2. Probably a top pick, so looks like he does pretty decent. 892, probably not what you would expect though. I mean, not as good. He didn't do too great towards the end, but that might be just the franchise in itself. Muslim Abdul ends up being a regen. He finishes top 3 as well. Dustin Wolf, who's with the team now, he ends up finishing just a bit above Kiprasov with 312, but they end up winning the 2 championships, 72 and 73, and then also 2053-54, sorry, and then once again in 2043-44 as well. So looks like none of those players were probably on the team when they ended up winning, but Abdul finishing with 440 is pretty good considering Jerome McGinley with 525. It's pretty crazy. And then Carolina Hurricanes, Carol Becca ends up finishing at the top. Ranton actually top 3 in terms of goals, which is crazy, and then Aspie as well. Pretty crazy. John Galloway looks like he's a regen as well. Ron Francis obviously just got beat by Becca, which is kind of crazy. That one stuck for a while, but they won. I think they won just the one championship because they won before, and 2044-45, and yet obviously the other one being in 2005-2006. So only winning once in 50 years, not too great. And then Chicago Blackhawks, obviously Bedard finishing at the top. Stan Mikita, yeah, I knew he was a thing. Patrick Kane still at the top, but Bedard killing everyone else, though. He even beats Bobby Hall's goals for their franchise. Crazy. And then even assists, over 1,000 assists. And their team, I mean, they end up winning with him, but I think he only has a one championship, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, so only one championship for Bedard, but crazy amount of points. Just couldn't get the players to play for it. Probably his contract every single year is crazy. And then Avalanche didn't win throughout all this. Carl Bergfist, who's a regen, ends up breaking Patrick Roy's win leader there. Almost double at that point, but pretty decent. But they couldn't win despite having a franchise a goalie. Clearly, he ends up finishing with 41 shutouts as well. Joe Sakic McKinnon there ends up making it, and then Hottie, however you would say it. But McKinnon ends up coming with the top three as well. So one of the only ones of real life there. And then Thomas Kubu, Pavel, and Christensen, top three there. Obviously new gens. Chanikov, probably in the league there as well. And then Luka Doust and ends up beating up Bobrovsky. Wow, only 231. So they end up winning. They end up winning three times though. Back to back there, and then they end up winning in 45-46. But looks like Luka Doust was probably one of the reasons why they ended up doing that. No, he wasn't. So they got other goalies that probably didn't perform nearly as consistently. But the fact that they haven't even got a goalie that has 250 wins in franchise history is kind of sad. So I guess goalies might not necessarily matter that much for long term. Dallas Stars here, Mike Medanos at the top, and then James Bowsey, who is a regen as well. And then Jamie Benn actually finishing top three, but I think they won the 2 times or 3 times. Yeah, they won 3 times to give them 4. Marty Turco still at the top. Kerry Lettinen still there. Jesus, so they didn't really have anyone that kind of jumped out there. Crazy. Not much changed. They ended up winning more recently in 2054, 55, and I think they won early on as well. I wonder who their goalie was if it wasn't Ottinger, because I'm assuming Ottinger ended up leaving and went to Toronto. So I think he won maybe the first 2 years there, but ultimately then leaving. That was crazy. Detroit ended up finishing with 15 now. They ended up winning a decent amount of championships as well, 4. But like I said, every 10 or so years they end up winning there as well. So pretty good. Nothing really changed other than Augustin gets the top 3 in terms of wins. And nothing else really changing, which kind of crazy considering the franchise that they've been. Even in the 90s, they were pretty dominant. So anyone that could crack that is very good as well. So Edmonton Oilers end up getting 7 championships here total. I believe they end up winning twice. I think twice, yeah. They won 42-43, and then they won 27-28. So obviously McDavid getting one of those. Finishing top in terms of points leader with a hefty amount over Draisaitl, but obviously 2 different kinds of players, so pretty easy to do that, I would say. But 23-72 is still pretty dominant, and 8-39. He even got more goals than Draisaitl, which is crazy. That is crazy. I don't find that to be realistic. I imagine Draisaitl will probably finish with more than McDavid for the franchise if he stays with them just as long as McDavid. I imagine. That's just wishful thinking, I guess. But still top 3, pretty good. Sidney Lake obviously coming at the top, and then Ramstrom as well. But looks like they're a decent team as of late, making the playoffs pretty consistently, I would say. Obviously a stretch that they didn't, but still pretty consistent there. Florida only won the first year, and I think it shows. Sam Reinhart Barkov ended up winning there as well. So technically they went back-to-back, I guess you could say. Jay Gates ends up getting the top in terms of wins, and then Mikion is playing now currently at the top as well. Bobrovsky's still 257, so not bad. And then Roberto Luongo with the most shutout leaders is pretty funny to see, but can Mikion end up winning? He probably will. So this is you're probably looking at your new franchise leader at some point because he's still relatively young. And I mean, they are making the playoffs, so they could still win more championships as well. Maybe as of late. LA ends up winning. I think they end up winning 3 times, so they had the 2 to begin with. But ultimately, not a consistent playoff team. But when they do make it, they do pretty well. They were pretty consistent. Well, in the past, I guess, and then pretty intermittently afterwards. But Vincent Montgomery finishing there, obviously regen as well, quick top 3, and then Sam Hollingshed also a regen as well. Ty Murnier, who also probably early on in the game that you can get him, but Anze Kopitar finishing at the top, Ty Murnier coming close. So, I mean, he might be a guy that you end up wanting to look up as well, but not really much to see here. Minnesota Wild finishes with 3, and then Boldy, Kowloon, and Rule as their top 3 in terms of points, which isn't too bad. Yeah, Backstrom's still there. Backstrom was pretty dominant, I would say. The fact that, I mean, he was dominant for, like, obviously a stretch there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm misremembering it. Jesus. So I guess their team isn't very good. I thought he was, I guess he was better than what you think, but still only 28 shutouts. So obviously not doing nearly as well, but they won the 3 there, and then we're back to the start. But we'll look at the history and then see if anything really jumps out here. But I did that. So it goes to 4 nations first, but Wayne Gretzky finishing at the top, Connor McDavid the second, Jaromir Jagr with third, Austin Matthews in the top. So nothing's changed in the next 25 years. Vasilevsky breaks Marty Brodeur's record. That's crazy. Yeah, because he was dominant with 2 franchises. That is insane. What year did he play till? He played till 42. So I must commend him. The fact that he won till he's 40, and obviously Marty Brodeur played till he was 42, but he ends up hitting 40 and was still pretty consistent at that point. He retired at least on top. Finished with 30 wins at the end of the season. Like, he could have probably pulled a Brodeur and tried to break records after that, but obviously he was pretty dominant throughout this, but only a 50 win season there, so 150 and then a 42. But I mean, realistically looking at this, he could easily win or do this in real life too. So I mean, look out for the future of Vasilevsky. He could easily break Brodeur's record, and not just by a bit, like by 40, by like probably a whole season, I would say, a season and a half maybe of wins is pretty crazy. But we'll take a look at the world real quick before we end up ending this. But history-wise, champions was Canada has 12, United States 10, and then Soviet Union was 7. I'm imagining Russia gets included in that as well. But so far, like it looks like states end up winning pretty consistently over this time span. Jesus, pretty dominant throughout the most of this. So obviously, this game looks like it favors U.S. a little bit more. We'll look at the demographics. I think that's what I'll actually change it here. I'll look at national data. We'll look at world rankings. So United States top in terms of ranking. Obviously, winning that many times will do it. Czech Republic in second, which is pretty shocking actually, and then Sweden in third, and then Canada. Canada ends up dropping to fourth, just above Russia. Russia arguably could have pushed through if they ended up doing better in the last competition. They probably would have been fifth, which is pretty wild. I did look at the data. I think I looked at the demographic, and almost everyone's from United States. The majority of the league, I'd say, if you add up everything, obviously United States is more than half of everything else. So 454 players play for United States, Minnesota and Michigan in particular. So obviously college NCAA seems like it dominates the most of it. And then for cities is Prague. So pretty crazy there. Massachusetts also at the top, Ontario with 41. But as you can see, the majority of it being the United States. So obviously, the longer they end up playing this, the more American players that end up kind of jumping out that. But pretty crazy still nonetheless. Hopefully you guys like this. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will be bringing out more content in the future. Obviously, this took a little bit longer than I expected to be able to simulate everything, but we'll end up starting a new series next week. Stay tuned, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.